Everyone. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and get started now as people come in. So thank you all for coming to Ethnic Studies Education in K through 12 schools. I'm Liliana Lopez. So just to begin, I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. Although I'm not physically on campus, and I'm assuming many of y'all are not, it's still important to recognize the position that the institution is on that is providing this platform for us. So UC San Diego is located on the unsettled and traditional homeland of the Kumeyaay people, which has been their home for more than 10,000 years now. As members of the UCSD community, we must acknowledge the history and legacy of the Kumeyaay people. So thank y'all. Just a quick overview of the things I'll be going over during this presentation. First, we'll go into community guidelines, an introduction of myself, what is ethnic studies, the arguments and studies for and against having ethnic studies as a part of K through 12 curriculum, looking at ethnic studies specifically in California, so San Francisco Unified School District and San Diego Unified School District, and then looking at who's going to be teaching these courses. So for community guidelines, I have set up Brave Space. So I can't guarantee that this will be a safe space. Ethnic studies is a very argued upon topic. People have different opinions on it. So I can't guarantee that everyone will agree with you or agree with what is being said, but I encourage you to still be present in this space and still interact with it. So going along with that, the use of inclusive language. I will be having discussion questions during this presentation. So when responding, please use inclusive language, honoring people's pronouns, things like that, just to make people feel welcomed in this space. Challenge the idea, not the person. So going along the same lines of the last two guidelines. If someone says something you don't particularly agree with, or there's something in the presentation that you don't agree with, don't challenge me or the person saying it, but rather the idea. So along with that, the Vegas rule, so what's learned here leaves here, but what's said here stays here. So if someone shares something personal during these discussion questions, make sure not to go like spreading people's information about that. Keep that within this space that we're making. So also take space, make space. So in the chat, make sure, you're taking space, participating, but also making space for other people to talk if they'd like. Lean into your discomfort. If you're someone who doesn't usually chat, I'd like to encourage you to. Most of the questions are just focused around you all as participants and your ideas. So there's no right or wrong answers with these. And going along with that, say it ugly. So don't feel as though you have to have the perfect terminology or say it in the perfect way. Whatever you have to say is valid no matter what language you're using. So go ahead and try it, even though it may not feel so good at first. So just a little bit about me. I'm Liliana, as I said before. I'm a second year with a major in ethnic studies and a minor in education studies. So obviously very intertwined with what this presentation is about. I'm one of the Joy de la Cruz Art and Activism interns here at the Cross Cultural Center, and I'm finishing out my year doing that. I'm from Oakland and have attended Oakland Public Schools my entire life, so that's a big part of me and my journey through K through 12. In my free time, I enjoy doing my makeup, watching TV shows, and playing Minecraft and Animal Crossing, so just a few of my hobbies. And I also have 3 dogs that I love very much. They're my life. But so why ethnic studies? As an ethnic studies major, I get asked this a lot. It's one of those majors where a lot of people are like, why is that? What are you going to do with that? What happens next? So for me, I was first introduced to ethnic studies in my junior year of high school. It was being offered as a dual enrollment course with a local community college after schools. So when my teacher heard about it, she recommended me to take the course because she knew from my interest in her class and other things that I could really gain a lot of knowledge from it, that it's something I was interested in. And so after taking that class, I really realized that that was what I was interested in. That's what I wanted to be studying. And so when applying to college, all I really knew was that I wanted to go into education and that I wanted to be a teacher, but didn't really know what I was going to do for my major, since at the time of me applying, UCSD didn't have an education major, other schools didn't have an education major. So I ended up deciding that ethnic studies was the right place for me because I already had a little bit of experience with it. It was something I found really interesting and something I could see myself going on and continuing to study for years. So it was really an opportunity for me to expand on the knowledge I already had and be introduced to new topics that I could, just really have fun with. So now I want to open it up to y'all and ask you, what was your first experience with ethnic studies and what is your connection to ethnic studies now? So are you also a major, a minor, anything like that? Just interested in it? I'd love to hear it. Go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll give y'all a few minutes to go ahead and do that. So someone shared, I first heard of ethnic studies when transferring to UCSD, never heard of it before. When looking for a minor, I found it and was interested and enrolled as a poli-sci major and ethnic studies minor. Someone else says, I don't have much knowledge about ethnic studies major or minor, but I'm pretty sure I've taken some classes which are required by that major, classes that talk about social justice issues. Someone else shared, I thought the first Asian American Studies class at UCSD. Oh, I taught the first Asian American Studies class at UCSD in 1986. I was interested in how ethnic studies is now taught in high school. Wow, that's super cool. Someone else, just interested, no background, grew up in Washington, D.C. area and diverse school friends, then lived in New Hampshire and taught for 23 years. So lots of different people in here, so many different backgrounds and different experience with ethnic studies, which is super cool to see. Introduced to ethnic studies by older cousins, and now is a way I'm able to apply language to social justice practice in my personal and professional life. Super important. Thank you for sharing. Introduced to ethnic studies in my freshman year of UCSD. I had not known about it as a field during then. It was during that time that I learned a lot about DEI, the various spaces on campus that provide resources to various groups. As an aspiring teacher, I was pretty interested in these things. Brenda Gomez, they, them. I was first introduced to ethnic studies at Pomona UPV, Metro, when I was in high school. That's cool. There's a lot of advocacy initiatives here in Pomona to learn about how we can have an ethnic studies program for K through 12. That's exactly what this presentation is talking about. So I'm super happy to hear that you were able to be exposed to it so young. My first experience was in my first year of undergrad. A friend encouraged me to take a course to help with feeling uncomfortable in a cis white male institution. No background with ethnic studies, but pursuing my master's in education at UCSD. Wow. So thank you all for sharing. Your stories are all like so great to hear. I'm so happy we have such a diverse panel of experience with ethnic studies, and hopefully you all can learn something or come out with something new from this presentation. So going to be moving on now. So what is ethnic studies? Ethnic studies is defined as the interdisciplinary study of difference, mostly surrounding race, ethnicity, and nation, but also sexuality, gender, and other similar topics. The first College of Ethnic Studies was created on March 20th, 1969 at San Francisco State University. So this was a result of a 5-month strike led by the Black Student Union and a coalition of other student groups who called themselves the Third World Liberation Front, who were demanding equal access to public higher education, more faculty of color, and a new curriculum, which would be ethnic studies. So the Third World Liberation Front wasn't specific to SF State University, but it was the one who got it initiated actually for the first time. So that's why we recognize them as starting this. And now ethnic studies is all across the country. So what are some arguments against having ethnic studies in K through 12 schools? So one of the issues often found with ethnic studies is the question of whose stories are being told. So one issue is that groups feel that the people being discussed and taught, like it should include everyone. And unfortunately, you know, with time constraint, class restraint, how much importance you want to like put on one group, you can't cover every single identity out there. And so one of the issues is figuring out who to highlight. With ethnic study courses, there's usually 4 main groups that are highlighted. So African American or Black people, Latino people, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and other groups are brought in, talked about differently. But those are the main 4 that usually are focused on in ethnic studies. So one of the main issues is, should that be all we're focusing on? Who else's stories are deserving of being told, deserving of being taught in these spaces? So that's one issue of creating a curriculum, is how do we divide up these groups and how do we decide who's worthy of instruction time? So along with that is HB 2281. So this was passed and signed into law by Arizona Governor Brewer in May 2010. It essentially banned all ethnic studies courses in the state of Arizona. So the bill didn't explicitly ban ethnic studies education, ethnic studies classes, but it framed its writing in a way that would not allow ethnic studies to be taught. So here is the word for word, the bill, what they enacted. So it says that the legislature finds and declares that public school pupils should be taught to treat and value each other as individuals and not be taught to resent or hate other races or classes of people. A school district or charter school in this state shall not include in its program of instruction any courses or classes that include any of the following: promote the overthrow of the United States government, promote resentment towards a race or class of people, are designed primarily for pupils of a particular ethnic group, or advocate ethnic solidarity instead of the treatment of pupils as individuals. So the argument behind this is that ethnic studies teaches hate, that it divides people, that it teaches students to hate the US government, to hate white people, to hate all of these things, when in reality, ethnic studies ask them to question these things. So ethnic studies looks at things through critical thinking and through questioning the systems in power. And so these things often can be seen as undermining them instead of questioning them and learning different perspectives of history that has been taught traditionally. So a documentary that goes into this really well is Precious Knowledge. It was released in 2011, that covers that bill going into place and the entire process of it, because that bill wasn't the first one. It was years of them attempting to get rid of ethnic studies courses in classes. So Precious Knowledge sort of follows the whole timeline of that. So it's an educational and political documentary directed by Ari Luis Palos and produced by Erin Isabel McGinnis, which was debuted at the San Diego Latino Film Festival in 2011. So it follows the story of students and teachers in Tucson Magnet High School fighting to keep their Mexican-American/Raza Studies program at the school, which was established in 1997. And the superintendent of schools, Tom Horn, announced that he would introduce a bill, SB 1108, which was the first of these bills trying to ban ethnic studies in the state of Arizona. So we're gonna watch this really short trailer for Precious Knowledge. I think it does a really good job of showing both sides of the arguments, both pro and con of ethnic studies in these schools.
You pick up a history book and you don't really see any other cultures in there but Caucasian, white people.
We were like the Mexicans sitting in the back, just sitting there because we had to be there.
I had a teacher that would tell me like, oh, you're not going to go to college.
The way things were going, I really just would have just left school.
I'm not gonna lie, I hated education.
Everybody knew that the school system was discriminatory. There was an urgency for us to make a statement. We're going to push the envelope a little further.
Good morning, you looking for M215?
Yes, sir.
That's my class. I'm Mr. Acosta. What's your name? It was really about how can we turn this around?
How do we fix societal problems in our school?
This class is based on critical thinking, and in that does come empowerment.
I actually know my history now.
I started getting A's and B's.
Our students are graduating at a much higher rate. Our kids are going to college at a much higher rate.
What's being done down here in Tucson Unified School District is teaching of hate speech, sedition.
I'm calling on the school district to shut down the ethnic studies program.
The program is administered by vehemently anti-American zealots.
It doesn't teach us to be anti-American, it teaches us to embrace America. This is why it's beautiful to all of us. No matter how far this bill goes, we're here together in the lucha.
We believe it's a matter of life and death.
They try to take these classes away. It's something impossible.
God,
The idea that race is no longer an issue, what we're saying is BS.
You want a different culture, go back to that culture. But this is America.
You get away from my border!
It's about the freedom to ask the questions that are the most pertinent in the way they view the world.
When you have students demonstrating, wearing brown shirts, bandanas, this is serious.
Okay, so again, I'm gonna open it up to y'all. That can be a lot. So have any of y'all seen the documentary Precious Knowledge? If you have, what were your thoughts and feelings while watching? If not, what were your thoughts and feelings about this quick trailer of it? Anything that comes to mind? Really open to y'all. I know when I watched, it was very emotional for me just to see like the fight that people have to go through for this this curriculum, this education that I obviously believe should be available to more people. So it is kind of hard to watch, but it's really important to show the fight that people have to go through to get the education that I'm currently receiving. So James shared, when the white man said that if they want that culture, they should leave the country because this is America while being in a court truly speaks volume on the educational stance of this country, amongst other things. Yvette shared, it is difficult to hear the claims of the opposition, especially when they are not close to being true. Someone said, I hadn't seen it, very interested in watching the whole film. It is a really great film. I would recommend it, watching it, if y'all have the time. I think it's a PBS film, so should be able to find it online, the entire thing. I haven't seen it. If teachers were willing to teach the curriculum, they just needed support from the school and community. I've seen this documentary various times in my classes or when we showed it in my org back in Pomona. I cry every time I watch it because they try to take away something we already had. This shows the white people are still colonizing our curriculum and we have yet to dismantle colonial curriculums. It motivates me. I feel the same way, Karen. I think such a curriculum teaches students about the viewpoints and perspectives of other people to function well in an ever-growing diverse society. I believe it's important to do this rather than concentrate only on American history. It shows how threatened many people feel by a history that is not based on the Pilgrims arriving at Plymouth Rock. The academic success implications of the curriculum. It was very powerful how learning the history, having a sense of identity, etc., contributes to our abilities to perform in the ways that institutions expect us to, but in a way that is grounded in a sense of collective identity. I agree. I've seen the trailer before, and it's very upsetting to see this disconnect in the purpose of ethnic studies education. I would want to hear more from the people who pushed for the bill and their reasoning. Yeah, I agree. Definitely check out the documentary because it does show a lot of the opposition side and their argument and why they were fighting for this and pushing for it. So going on, thank you all for sharing again. I really love the conversation that we're having in the chat. So now, what are the arguments for having ethnic studies in K-12 schools? Y'all have already brought up a lot of the main points in the chat and in discussing precious knowledge. So here's just a study that was done in 2016 by Stanford Graduate School of Education, focusing on 1,405 ninth graders, specifically those close to a 2.0 GPA in San Francisco high schools. So what the study did was took students with below a 2.0 or below GPA and made the ethnic studies class a requirement for them to take, and those with above a 2.0, it was an optional course. So just to make it sort of fair to, you know, do the study, actually those were the restraints on it. So they found that students in ethnic studies courses had a GPA increase of 1.4 points. The attendance of students in the courses increased by 21%. Students enrolled added an additional 23 credits to their transcripts, and they found that this was especially true for Latino males. So they had the biggest outcome, biggest improvement from taking an ethnic studies course. So just to break down like what these things mean, why this is important. So a GPA increase of 1.4 points is pretty significant. I'm sure everyone who's been through school, is currently in school, can agree that I would be pretty happy if my GPA went up by 1.4 points. So that's a significant like increase in your GPA. The attendance of students are more engaged in class material. They're more willing to come to school. They were skipping school less often. And 20% of the time is really significant to be increasing from what was before. Students enrolled added an additional 23 credits to the transcript. So this is important because it wasn't just that they were doing well in ethnic studies, it was that they were doing well in all of their classes. So while enrolled in ethnic studies, they were also passing their math classes, their science classes, their English classes. It wasn't just that they were getting A's in this one class, it was that overall they were doing a lot better in their classes and able to take more and get more credits for graduation. So moving on from this, there's been 2 studies done on the impact on Filipino students and their process of becoming activists from taking Filipino American studies. So Strobel did a study, and they found that learning about the histories of colonialism within an ethnic studies context provided students the opportunity to better understand their personal and familial experiences. So like some of y'all mentioned in your experience with ethnic studies, learning it, you're able to better understand yourself and what's going on around you. It's also allowed them to question their internalization of colonialism and develop ways to resist a colonial mentality, as well as naming the process of decolonization as having 3 elements. So naming, reflecting, and acting. So being able to have the language for these things, being able to critically think and reflect on these things, and then being able to take action and do something in order to make a difference now that they have recognized what it is, have understand it like to themselves, and can now make a difference. So Halago, who did a study on the long-term effects of taking ethnic studies on Filipino American students, discovered that there's 5 things that ethnic studies requires from ethnic studies and becoming active requires. So it requires deep and critical thinking of one's history and cultural focus on the concept of diversity, multiculturalism, imperialism, oppression, revolution, and racism. It must also be feeling-based that allows mourning, dreaming, confusion, struggle, excitement, passion, empathy to be sources of knowledge. It needs to create a space for formerly colonized people to come together and unite. It teaches life skills that serve one personally and professionally, and it must have a social action component that models activism towards social change. So, like I mentioned before, it's about naming these things, knowing what multiculturalism is, imperialism, oppression, using your own experiences, your own mourning, your own confusion, your own struggle to understand these things, having the space at all to be able to do these things, and really being able to apply it to yourself, your community, and moving forward, making change based on these things. So this is another quick video from Ethnic Studies Now about Ethnic Studies Now is an organization that works with different communities, different school districts in order to get ethnic studies implemented. So this is a video that they made in Compton talking about why ethnic studies is important to their communities specifically.
In order for it to really be authentic, it has to be unapologetic. There's so much power in our youth that is not utilized and is not honored. You grow up and you see problems and issues in your community, all that suffering and trauma that you experience, you begin to blame yourself for it. You begin to blame your teachers. There's so much richness that isn't already accounted for in our curriculum. You're learning a Eurocentric, whitewashed history. I've always been hungry to know about my own culture, my own history, but also that of my neighbors. There's a history of Black and Brown solidarity. To be the first Latino family in a historically Black neighborhood. And then I go to college and I learned that actually Compton was historically all white. I was growing up in a part of the city that was meant to exclude Black people. We aren't afraid to have those heavy, uncomfortable, politically incorrect, radical sometimes, real conversations. Ethnic studies for Compton gives us a language for the trauma. For me to really learn about the historical roots of how we got to where we're at today, to learn about histories of genocide, colonialism, immigration, it's really important for me to be able to name the oppression. Technically, ethnic studies is the analysis of systems of power, movements, individuals, institutions, with the lens of ethnic breakdown, how those groups have been affected. There has to be a learning process. It has to be relevant, culturally relevant. And we don't have that, right? So we have that for rich kids, but poor kids never have that.
In the context of Compton, we have to address race relations. We have to address the politics of water. To feel accounted for, to feel like you have a voice, it's kind of like an out-of-body experience, right? Because our students, through ethnic studies, would be able to see, okay, there's certain other pieces that are operating right now that are making me feel helpless because of certain identities and certain groups that I am a part of. Ethnic studies now, we want ethnic studies courses to be implemented into the high school curriculum for Compton high schools and to become a graduation requirement implemented by, if not this academic school year, the next.
In order for us to do that, we need to pass an ethnic studies resolution. We need to work with school board members to do this so that this resolution truly reflects the visions and the goals that we want for ethnic studies.
Students to be transformational, to be agents of change.
Once you begin to see that you could be part of this legacy, you begin to see yourself as history makers. You know, you begin to see that you also have power, that people like you, ordinary people, working class people, poor people, undocumented people, queer people have had power historically. And we begin to name our own stories, document our own stories, begin to tell our stories for ourselves. That's the power of ethnic studies, and we want young people in our community to be able to tell their stories, block by block, street by street, you know, district by district.
Okay, so going from that into, I mean, if y'all would like, you can share in the chat your thoughts on that, anything that came up for you watching that. And then we'll go into looking specifically at ethnic studies in California. If y'all would like, you could share in the chat how that video impacted you, anything. And then we're going to go into ethnic studies specifically in California today. I can see how learning about the history of your own community is beneficial, even if there is a dark history, much like a lot of the history in America. I agree. I think no matter what the history is, it's important to learn it, especially your local history. In a lot of schools, you learn about California's history as a whole, but never really get to hear about your community specifically. So it is something important to be highlighted in these courses. This video is empowering because regardless of where you come from, it empowers the community to come together. I agree, it really helps to build strength in communities and really see people as coming together. Thank y'all for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and move on and get into ethnic studies specifically in California. So we got one more, sorry. I particularly agree with the fact that the history taught in schools should not be completely Eurocentric. Alongside ethnic studies, I have seen LGBTQ studies being integrated in other communities, for instance, public schools in Illinois. That's super cool, Julia. Thank you for sharing that. I'll look into that more because that's also something really important and also something to think about that being implemented as a part of ethnic studies, given its own curriculum by itself. So thank you for your comment. So AB 2772 was a bill pushed for in 2018 that would require students in all California high schools to take one ethnic studies class for graduation. The bill was vetoed by Governor Jerry Brown at the time in September, not Septerm, 2018, saying, quote, "School districts already can and are requiring ethnic studies for graduation. While I recognize the value of these courses, I am reluctant to encourage yet another graduation requirement, especially when students are already overburdened by multiple tests and endless hours of homework." So this is a good point by Governor Jerry Brown that students in high schools are very overwhelmed with the requirements for graduation, requirements to apply for colleges, and all of these other things. But ethnic studies is something that is important enough that should be implemented into these requirements. So seeing how things can be changed in order to get it in there without putting more burden on the students. And with the point of school districts already can and are requiring ethnic studies for graduation, an important point of this bill is that it would actually provide funding for school districts to be able to implement this. So a lot of the issue with implementing new curriculum is the money, because it's expensive to create a curriculum, get teachers, and do all of these things. So a lot of the times that can prohibit smaller school districts that aren't as well funded from having ethnic studies in their communities. And sometimes those are the ones that need it most and should be getting it provided for their students. So from that, we're going to be looking at San Francisco Unified School District in more detail. So obviously, San Francisco State University was the first college to get ethnic studies implemented on the college level. And so San Francisco Unified School District has done a lot to sort of continue that legacy as a vocal point for ethnic studies, and has made ethnic studies a graduation requirement for all high school students. So on December 9th, 2014, the SF Unified School District Board of Education unanimously voted to approve ethnic studies graduation requirement, and it was available in all San Francisco high schools by the 2015-2016 school year. So it's been happening there for a few years now. So this wasn't the end of ethnic studies, although this is the goal to have it in K through 12. That isn't the stopping point. There's a lot more to go from just having one ethnic studies graduation requirement, from having one ethnic studies elective course that is being fought for. So last year, San Francisco Unified School District approved an equity studies fusion curriculum. So what that does is it fuses equity studies, which is pretty much ethnic studies, but focuses on other things, as mentioned, talking about LGBTQ history, talking about women's history, other things that are outside of ethnic studies, like straight curriculum. So it moves past just having the one ethnic studies course, as I mentioned, and focuses more on infusing ethnic studies and infusing equity studies and these things into all classes that high schoolers take. So it would be like having ethnic studies as a part of all of your courses, using this critical thinking as a framework in every subject you're taking at school. So San Francisco Unified School District has moved to make it a part of all 6th through 12th grade English and history courses. So all throughout middle school and high school, students will be taking ethnic studies courses. The way they do this is through making it gradually become more complex, having them answer different questions, and just working towards that. So I'll give a few examples in the next slide. So starting in their 6th grade year, students will be taking 6th grade Ancient Civilization and 6th grade ELA, just the standard classes you take that year. But while doing that, students will be asked questions such as, How do our individual perspectives shape the way we experience the world? What happens when different perspectives lead to divergent understandings? How can differing perspectives be mediated? So along with these essential questions that they'll be asked to think about, asked to answer during the course, they'll also be learning things such as fairness, humanity, inclusion, exclusion, community, culture, justice, citizenship. So just sort of briefly introducing them to this critical thinking that is ethnic studies and getting them to rethink the way that they've been taught originally of just one perspective. So the same thing would happen 7th, 8th, and then in 9th grade would be when they take the actual 9th grade ethnic studies course and an ethnic lit course, so an ethnic literature course. In this one, it would become more complex vocabulary that they would be learning. So they'd be learning white supremacy, the 3 types of systems, dehumanization, humanization, stereotypes, social change movements, objectification, race, nationality, while also questioning why are singular stories of whole groups of people necessarily incomplete? How have systems of oppression and models of resistance evolved over time? How can a multiplicity of narratives broaden our understanding of events, people, and places? So while doing their classwork, while getting their graduation requirements, they are able to ask these questions that most students don't get the opportunity to learn, opportunity to even think about until higher education if they go on to pursue that. So that's just 9th grade. By the time they're in 12th grade, getting ready to graduate, go on to higher education, go into the workforce, whatever they decide to do, they're going to be taking 12th grade American democracy and economics and Euro Lit. But at the same time, they will be asking, what are the responsibilities of critically engaged citizens in a democratic society? Is transformative social change possible when working within existing institutions? What does equity look like in practice? They'll be learning this while learning about critical democratic citizenship, civic engagement, solidarity, equity versus equality. So through these different curriculums, you can really see the, viewing this, thinking, and then later taking action. You can see the 3 vital steps that were mentioned earlier of what it takes to be ethnic studies curriculum, of what students need to be doing in order for this to be a beneficial class to them. So I want to ask y'all, how do you think your K-12 education would have been different if you were able to take ethnic studies? I know for myself, this would have been life-changing if I was exposed to these different concepts, these different vocabulary at such a young age. Like I didn't know most of these things except for off of the internet, off of seeing it on Twitter, but it makes you think what a bigger impact it would have if it was teachers telling you this, if it was, your school telling you this stuff is important to see, rather than the internet, which is often, looked down upon as a form of knowledge, which is often seen as, not a good place to gain things from. So how do you think your education would have been different if you were able to have these classes? Would you have wanted to take them? I'm learning so much from my 25-year-old daughter about social justice. I wish I'd understood when I was younger. Yeah, like you can learn these things at any age. So why not let it be earlier in life and let this have a lasting impact? Thank you for sharing, Elizabeth. Someone else says, I would have had access to knowledge that would empower me to exercise my youth voice. I also think I would have seen myself in education. Yeah, that's super important, of being able to see yourself in the curriculum, being able to relate to things that are being taught. Someone says, if I was exposed to ethnic studies at an earlier age, it would have definitely impacted me and would probably keep me in school because I used to ditch a lot and felt that my teachers did not believe in me or care for me. It would have motivated me at an earlier age to become an activist and even love myself. I feel like ethnic studies brings healing and self-love as well. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. I agree. For me, I really enjoyed AP Euro. I feel like these questions and more abstract concepts were addressed. I think there would have been less awkward moments within the class if we were encouraged to share our ideas in our US history class. I think that's a really good point, Christina, of that some of these courses, these higher up AP courses do address these concepts and do mention them, but it's also who are these AP courses available to, who is able to take them, and making it more accessible to everyone. So I'm really happy like these things were talked about in those courses, but if everyone could have this in their standard class, it'd be really, really beneficial to everyone. So thank you for sharing. I would have loved to learn this when younger. Ethnic studies can be very personal and can help understand the space we stand and the systems that rule our society. If I would have chosen since the beginning of my college career to choose it as a major, I would have been more aware of what's going on around me. I would have been able to put my name to what I was experiencing. Also, not just relying on social media to learn these things, although at times it was the only source I had. I began to see how government works after learning about ethnic studies. So much of government policy in local communities such as Compton is determined by politicians who dismiss the voices of the minorities. Life-changing for me as well. I feel like I would have been able to understand a lot of my experiences that I thought alienated me due to my different identities that weren't my fault, but due to larger social systems at a younger age. I would have been able to definitely apply these critical thinking skills in other aspects of my schooling and social life as well. These thinking skills are important for one to learn about new knowledge and work effectively with different people. I would have been able to relate to my family and my peers more. Even though I was a Filipino growing up in schools with a large Filipino population, I didn't feel like I could connect with the culture of my friends. Ethnic studies would have helped build more bridges in our community. I think that I would have been able to understand and have time to process my identities in relation to my community and other people. Though I have been able to do so during college, I know that I could have had some peace knowing what was happening around/to me, such as microaggressions, imposter syndrome because of systemic racism in schools, etc. Yeah, so y'all are all bringing up such great points. Thank you all for sharing. I resonate with so many of these points, and it's a part of the reason why this topic is so important to me, why I'm so passionate about it, because I think that all people coming from these backgrounds, whether they've thought about it or not, have had these experiences, have had these things happen to them. And ethnic studies is a way for people to understand it, to take action, to really be able to reflect. And everyone should get that opportunity to do so and not have to go on to higher ed, not have to do research on their own, to feel a part of their community, to feel, to not feel isolated, to feel as though they're empowered and can make change. And yeah, thank you all for sharing. It really means a lot to me. Thank you. So moving on, we're going to be looking at San Diego Unified School District. Thank you to Professor Trish. She is one of the EDS professors here at UCSD, and she's actually the co-chair of the Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee for San Diego Unified School District, which I will be talking about, and she gave me a lot of the resources and knowledge for this section of the presentation. So just wanted to shout her out. So San Diego Unified School District, their fight for ethnic studies began with the Association of Raza Educators. So they're a group of mostly Chicano teachers in San Diego and LA that sort of kick off like fighting for ethnic studies in these districts. So they started in LA and now have a San Diego chapter. San Diego is actually the second largest school district in California, right behind Los Angeles. So it is a really big thing to try and get this implemented throughout such a large school district. So the Association of Raza Educators got that started. The first high school was Lincoln High School to implement an ethnic studies course into curriculum. This was with the addition of their School for Social Justice. So what this did was have a 9th grade social justice class for the students that were in this school. Students really improved, they enjoyed the class, but one issue they found was that students afterwards would go into their regular history class, their regular English class, and still be asking these ethnic studies questions, still be thinking critically about what they're being taught, thinking deeper into the curriculum, but there was nowhere else for them to turn. They had no other way to express these things. There was even pushback from teachers who didn't enjoy students, undermining them, questioning what they were teaching. And so it became apparent that this one 9th grade social justice class wasn't enough for the students at this school, that they wanted more classes to engage them in these topics. So it didn't end there. The Association of Raza Educators continued pushing for ethnic studies using the district's D and F rate as incentives. So the D and F rate is exactly what it is. It's a calculation of the rate of students who are getting D's and F's in their school. So it's not a good statistic. San Diego Unified School District wants to get it lower. They don't want their students failing for different reasons, but the Association of Raza Educators use this as an incentive to get them to implement ethnic studies, showing them all of the studies that I showed y'all and other ones about the improvement that students show when they are able to take an ethnic studies course. So 7 years ago now, they created the Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee after the Association of Raza Educators going to school board, going to press, going to everyone pushing for this stuff. The school district decided to create this advisory committee in order to accomplish what they wanted to, but they gave them virtually no money or power to actually accomplish their goals. So at that point, it kind of just felt like a way to get them to shut up, to stop trying to implement this, to just get them to go away, be like, I gave you this committee, so problem solved. But of course, weren't gonna stop there. So after 6 years, last spring, about a year ago now, the San Diego School Board unanimously voted to approve one course required for high school graduation by the 2020-2021 school year. So starting next year, ethnic studies will be a high school graduation requirement in San Diego Unified School Districts, which is really cool. But again, like with SF, it doesn't stop there. It's really good to have this course be required and have students take it, but there's a lot more that can be done in order to continue making ethnic studies accessible, continue making it available to students. So the advisory committee is still working and hopes to continue implementing ethnic studies into other subjects, as well as looking for teachers for these classes and aides to help existing teachers with the curriculum. Because of course, with an ethnic studies curriculum, you need to have experience with that as a teacher and be familiar with all these terms and concepts that you're teaching, like with any other subject. So that brings me to the question of who's going to teach. So according to data, of all ethnic studies graduates, people who receive a degree in ethnic studies, the most common professions are going into colleges, universities, and professional schools, so community colleges, going into those workforces. Almost 20,000 people who get an ethnic studies degree go into that. Followed closely is going into elementary and secondary schools, And as you can see from the chart, that is the vast majority of graduates in ethnic studies of the fields they go into, with next being legal services, and it's less than half the amount of those going into education. So there are people who have the experience, who have the degree, who can be teaching these courses, but as ethnic studies gets more common in schools, we have to look at actually getting these people to teach in these classes. So one of the things that have started to pop up are ethnic studies credential programs. So ethnic studies credential programs are becoming more and more popular. One example is at Cal State Northridge. So they have a social science teaching credential, which is just for all middle school and high school history classes, United States history, world history, and with taking certain electives during this credential program, you can go on to be to have a credential in cultures, anthropology, sociology, women history, ethnic studies, and law-related education. So around the country, these credential programs are popping up, as well as other programs to help train teachers who are going into ethnic studies curriculum, as it's not easy to just be thrown into something with no previous knowledge of it. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you all. Here's a survey link, and with filling out the survey, you get the chance to be entered in an opportunity drawing. So I would really appreciate it if you do that. You can either scan the QR code with your phone or head over to the tinyurl.com/ETHN survey. Thank you, James. Thank you. But yes, thank you. And if y'all have any questions or anything, just want to chat, where can we find the recording for this webinar? The webinar will be posted on YouTube in a few days. I can send out an email to the participants, to all of y'all who are here afterwards, of the link when it comes out. Thank you all. Thank you all for your contributions to the chat. It was really good conversation.